Hey, how's it going? Midwest Survivor, time for dinner chat. So, tonight we're having sliced potatoes, broccoli, and another chicken thigh. And I just want to say thank you for those of you that have watched, those that have been following, those that have been checking out the Facebook posts, the Facebook shorts, the TikToks, the Instagrams, all that good stuff. Like and subscribe, hit that bell, liking and subscribing, it goes a long way. So, one thing I want to talk about tonight, and this is kind of gonna be a personal moment. So, what I want to talk about tonight is the moments where I realized that there were things that were wrong, and that things were not in a good place, a good, healthy place, and I realized that I had to get out. So first off, let me send a shout out to Melissa. Honey, you are an amazing woman. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for backing me. Thank you for believing me. When everybody else has turned their back on me and told me that have basically forced their own perceptions down my throat and not listened to me and not cared. You've been the one person that's cared besides the people I've been working with. And if any of you guys from work or ladies from work are watching, thank you so much for all your support and understanding. It means the world to me. You don't know what it's like whenever your family quits listening to you, your friends quit listening to you, and you're all alone. But hey, you know what? I'm strong. We're going to rebuild. We're going to get stronger, and we're going to do this together. So I think the moment that hit me, one of the big moments that hit me that something was wrong was whenever I was growing up, whenever I was 6 years old, went to a church, and this pastor's wife would always sit behind us for whatever reason. And she would, and because of my age at the time, 6-year-old kids don't know a whole lot. But this was a moment when I realized that something was seriously wrong in the dynamic and then the dysfunction of my childhood. As a 6-year-old boy, I realized and understood that it is the role of the parents to protect the children and to keep them safe and to shield them from anything that could harm them. Well, at 6 years old, we go to this church, and this pastor's wife, for whatever reason, starts sitting behind us. And whenever I was younger, I had a lot more hair than what I have now. It was a lot thicker and a lot darker, but time goes on, and your hair changes or whatever. But my hair at the back of my head grows to a point right in the middle of my head. Not a big deal, A lot of people have different hair. Hair grows different ways. Not a big deal. But for whatever reason, this crazy, demented, sadistic woman took it upon herself to come to the realization that I was growing my hair long at 6 years old. Now, let me explain that I do not like my hair growing very long. So the possibility of me growing my hair into a mullet or long hair or whatever is completely far-fetched. I hate long hair on myself. Hey, anybody else? Hey, knock yourself out. But for me, it just doesn't work for me. So she decides that she's going to start pulling on my hair. And every Sunday, literally, she would sit behind us and she would just yank on the back of my hair. And I told my parents, and I told my parents, and I told my parents, and we would move around from different points of the church, and she would always sit behind us. Anytime we moved, she moved. Anytime we sat in a different spot, she sat in a different spot. And she was very verbally abusive to me. She kept saying that I shouldn't listen to my grandparents because they didn't go to church, the same church as us, and that they were going to hell because they were a different religion than us. And that really bothered me. And then furthermore, 6-year-old kid, they've got the attention span of a gnat. And we went to church Sunday morning and Sunday night. Well, Sunday night, it would get late, service would go long, and naturally, as kids do, they get tired. Well, I would crawl under the pew and go to sleep. Well, this woman would take it upon herself to kick me under the pew. And I tried telling my parents this. I tried to get them to understand what was going on. And they said to me, and I quote, "Well, we can't leave because God did not tell us that we could leave." Okay. Where in the Bible does it say that you are supposed to let other people abuse your children? I don't think there's a scripture for that. So because God didn't tell my mom and dad that they could leave, from the age of 6 to the age of 10, I was tormented by this evil woman. Fortunately, she has passed on, and I pray mercy to her, and I hope that God is merciful. But this woman was evil and tormented me, both physically, emotionally, and verbally. So this went on for 4 years, and I began to realize that mom and dad didn't care because God didn't tell them that they could leave the church. So that was red flag number 1. So red flag number 2 kind of happened later in life. Age of 16, my dad gets the call to minister, to go back and pastor a church. No big deal. Well, it happens to be the church where all this stuff happens at. And I know what they're going to think, and I know what they're going to say. And if you're watching this video, you guys have your own opinions. I have my opinions, and you have your perceptions. I've got my perceptions. So if you don't like what I'm saying, just don't watch the video. But their perception was that because it didn't happen to them, it wasn't a big deal. Well, first off, it did happen to them. I was their child. I was their responsibility. They should have protected me. And as a young child, I didn't have a voice. I couldn't protect myself. But the logic behind this of going back to that church where I was abused, verbally, physically, emotionally, was so damaging and so scary to me that I'm like, okay, I've escaped. I was in a place where I felt safe, where I felt okay, but because they didn't feel okay, they had to drag me back to that place of abuse. And I tried telling my dad, I'm like, listen, I don't feel this. This isn't what I want to do. This isn't where I want to be. And my dad says unto me, quote unquote, "You're part of this family. You're going where we're going." End of discussion. Didn't care about my feelings. Didn't care about what had happened to me. It was all about him and my mom and what they wanted. It devastated me. And that's whenever I realized that that was the 2 instances with my family dynamic where I realized there was something very, very badly wrong. I mean, what kind of mindset, what kind of thought processes does a person have to understand how messed up that is? You send your child back to the place where that child was abused just because it's all about you and what you want and your image and your ministry. I'm sorry, that's not ministry by any definition that I know of. That's selfishness and callousness and uncaring. That's the highest form of emotional abuse, manipulation, guilt, and shame that I know of. And that happened. Not once, but twice. So, red flag number 3. The years of being in the Pentecostal and Apostolic Church, I realized, and this is detailed in my book, Behind the Silence, and I'm going to be detailing it more in my future book, Blood on the Altar. But I began to realize the manipulation and the gaslighting and how there were rules for different people. If you went to Bible college, if you donated so much money to the church or to the organizations, or if you if you were a charter member of the church, you could just about get away with anything. And not to beat around the bush, but Jesus in the Bible spoke against the Pharisees and the Sadducees about having two sets of rules, the rules for them and then the rules they enforced on everybody else. I'm sorry to say, but based on my experience in the Apostolic Church, I'm going to go ahead and say this, and this is my perception and my opinions. Everybody has their own perceptions, their own opinions based on their experiences, their education, whatever. But there is a strong Pharisee, Sadducee mindset in the Apostolic Church where there are the rules for the people that are holding the reins and in charge of everything, and then there's the rules for everybody else. And I'm sorry to say, it doesn't matter who you are, what your name is, how much money you got, what position you hold, or what kind of license or education or credentials you got. If you break the rules, you don't need to get your mistakes don't need to get swept under the rug. You don't need to go on sabbaticals. You break the rules, you need to be held accountable. Now listen, there's going to be people that pop on my video and say, well, he's done this, he's done that. Listen, I know what I've done. God knows what I've done. And that's between him and me, nobody else. And if you all have opinions, just keep them to yourself. I've got opinions about you. I keep them to myself now. It's one of those lessons that we learn in life. Quit causing drama. We're not in high school anymore. We're all adults. Let's grow up. Let's be adults. But the point is this. If we can't be honest with ourselves, if we can't tell the truth and be truthful without fear of condemnation or gaslighting or guilt or manipulation or shame, then what good is what we believe? What good is the Word of God? What good is our churches if we can't feel safe there? If we can't feel like we can be honest about ourselves and honest about the hurts and honest about the things that have hurt us? And that doesn't just need to be in our churches. That needs to be in our workplaces. That needs to be among our families. That needs to be among our friends. If we can't feel safe with the people that we grew up with and the people that loved us and cared about us and nourished us, then they're not good people, and we need to cut ourselves away. That's what I have done. I don't feel safe around a lot of my family anymore. I don't feel safe a lot around these so-called church people that I grew up with, because I was told that because of the choices that I made, I deserve to live in a tent out in Crab Orchard. So, and you know who you are, you know what you said, you know what you've done. I was also told too that, well, this is just what he does. He runs away whenever it gets bad. Well, listen, I tried making it work. Nobody listened to me. Everybody was forcing their own perceptions down my throat. And I was unheard, uncared for, and completely disrespected. It's always been the expectation that I had to respect people, that I had to follow the rules, that I had to do this and I had to do that. This unrealistic expectation of all these rules and all these mantras, but yet everybody else that's holding the reins doesn't have to play by those rules, is complete hypocrisy. It's a Pharisee mindset. It's a Sadducee mindset. And I'm sorry to say, I'm not playing by those rules anymore. And if it costs me every relationship I've ever had, so be it. But I'm not playing anymore. I've got a spine. I've got the parts of the man that makes me a man. And by golly, I'm going to do what needs to be done. I'm not going to be guilted. I'm not going to be shamed. I'm not going to be yelled down. I'm not going to be manipulated. I'm not going to be told that well, you need to be on Prozac. You need to get help. I'm sorry, but I'm seeing things very clearly and very concisely for the first time in my life. And the people that are holding the reins are the ones that are scared because, hey, he's seeing it, and we can't rein him in anymore. Well, I'm sorry to say, I should have came to this conclusion in my 20s, but as they say, better late than never. The next thing is, I thought that criticism and critique was normal, and I realized that negative criticism, self-destructive, controlling people with other people's perceptions is guilt, manipulation, and gaslighting at its highest level. I finally realized that everything was about everybody else, and all I wanted to do was just go along to avoid the conflict. Well, I'm sorry to say, this is life. Conflict is normal. And I know there's a few people out there that say, well, you just need to get along with people. You just need... No. Because here's the thing. If right is right and wrong is wrong, and you go along with wrong people, and you know it's wrong, then it's wrong, and you're just as wrong for going along with it. I began to realize that I had to be my own man. And I realized that sometimes being aware and being the word I'm thinking of is being aware and coming to the realization that, hey, there's some changes that need to happen, and the people that I've surrounded myself are not good people. They say they're good, but their actions and the things that they do not line up with what they say. And I'm sorry to say, but if you are leading a recovery group, or you're trying to lead people towards a sense of recovery, but yet people are going to each other's houses and talking about each other behind their backs and saying, well, about so-and-so's sister or so-and-so's brother or so-and-so's mom and dad, that's not recovery. That's gossip at the highest level. And there's enough gossip in the world. We don't need any more of that. And if you're leading a recovery group and you go out to eat with somebody, and even though they're not part of your recovery group, and that person says and has a conversation with you, and then you turn around and tell that conversation to the person that you had dinner with about the things you said, you're still betraying confidence whether or not they're part of that recovery group or not. The very things that you have harped against about betrayal and keeping things safe and keeping things confident is still betrayal whether or not they're part of the group or not. Confidence and confidentiality should be confident and confidentiality, not confidentiality with convenience, not safety with convenience, and not safety with, well, they're part of our group, so they're safe. Well, they're not part of our group, so we can do whatever we want. Either everybody is safe or nobody's safe. And we've got to break through this mindset of, well, there's church people and then there's worldly people. I'm sorry to say, there's hypocrites on both sides. There's bad people on both sides. And I believe in God. I trust God. I know God is real. I believe His Word is real. But there is so much hurt and dysfunction in all the organized religions that, I just can't buy it anymore. If you have to leave a church every 4 to 5 years just because things don't go the way that you think they should, you don't have the mind of Christ in you. And if you are backstabbing and talking about people in your back while supporting a recovery group, even though these people aren't part of your recovery group, you don't have a healthy mindset either. And regardless of whether you agree or disagree with somebody, you still need to love people. You still need to be kind to people. You still need to look out for people. And you still don't need to betray the confidences of people, whether or not they are doing what you think they should do or not do. And telling somebody that they deserve to live in a tent in a state park, not very Christ-like. I've mentioned this story to several people that I've ran into, and they have the responses have been profane, like what the F? Who the F does that person think they is? Does that F call himself a pastor? To oh my God, how in the world did you not make it through? All kinds of responses. And I've told everything that's happened to me to a lot of people. And, here's the thing. It's not whining. It's not complaining. And a lot of people are going to say it is. But here's the reality. It's the truth. And if you can't speak the truth without feeling shamed, condemned, or being told that you're just making excuses, you're just telling a story or whatever, then you don't need to be talking to those people. They don't have your best interests at heart. They're not compassionate. They're not understanding. They just want to hear themselves yell. And as I close out dinner chat tonight, I'll leave you with a pearl of wisdom. And my grandpa told me this one. There was a lot of people in my life, some I was related to and some that I got connected with because of different circumstances. And these people, all they knew how to do was yell and scream and show their rear ends and be jerks. And I asked my grandpa before he passed away, I was like, Grandpa, how in the world do you deal with people that know how to yell? And he looked at me and he said, it's like this. Just because they know how to yell doesn't mean they're right. It doesn't mean they're wrong. They just know how to yell and they know how to show their rear end. So, Midwest Survivor, I hope you enjoyed Dinner Chat. Be sure to like, be sure to subscribe. More content to follow. I'll see you tomorrow at Dinner Chat. This was going to be posted to TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. I'll be rolling out more content on my book, Blood on the Altar. I also updated some manuscripts on the books that are published, so be sure to go to Amazon, check those out. Just search for Behind the Silence, The Price of the Boy, Rebuilding After the Storm, and Death of a Small Village. So y'all have a good evening. Stay strong, stay healthy. Look forward to talking to you tomorrow night. Take care.